I have quite a lot of interaction with students on the co-curricular front. I'm the senior faculty in residence of Pioneer Hall, if any of you stays in the hall. As a faculty, I am from School of Biological Sciences, so I'm trained in bacteriology. And then in Inspire, with my colleagues, I'm taking care of experiential and collaborative learning. All right, so very happy to share my experiences or maybe hear from you your various perspectives about productive failure.
Hi, I'm Dominic, currently a Year 1 PhD student from the School of EEE. I just recently graduated from my bachelor's last semester.
My name is Kin. I graduated last year from NTU with a double degree in engineering and econs. I was also from the School of EEE as well. I'm studying at IEM. Currently, I'm working in investor relations at a private equity firm.
I'm really, really curious to actually get a sense of how the message of productive failure has landed so far with you guys. So maybe I'll just begin with, I'll just pick on Dominic.
Should I leave the room?
Because you graduated, you're obviously a successful student. Like, what kind of teaching have you experienced? How do you feel about the fact that you have to fail in order to learn more deeply?
If anyone's here from EEE, I think our lectures and our tutorials are usually same style, same curriculum, right? You go to a lecture, and even currently as a postgrad student, you go lecture, then the prof teaches for 2 hours, 3 hours straight. Then maybe if you have tutorials, then you go through the tutorials, and then you repeat that same mode, same concept throughout the other EEE courses that you take. So I think this is how I've been learning. Has it worked for me? Yeah, I think for some courses, yes, but for others, I really have to spend more time going back and then really understanding, because I don't go through that concept of productive failure. The prof teaches you everything. Then sometimes for courses which are slightly tougher, slightly more difficult, then I have to repeat that course again. I have to rewatch the lecture videos again. I have to go through the entire course from the very beginning. So I take additional 2-3 hours more just to really get the concept ingrained into my brain, and I really understand what the prof is actually teaching.
Similar to what Dom has said, I think the way we learn in Singapore is quite straightforward, and it has been the same since primary school, secondary school, all the way up to higher education, right? You come into a lecture theatre, you listen to your prof, you listen to your teacher, and then you do practice questions, and then that's how you learn, and then you have an exam at the end. But I think something new that I've experienced in NTU is something called IRA, or even a pre-lesson quiz of sorts, where we watch some form of lecture video by ourselves, and then we come into class, and then before the professor goes through the tutorial, he'll make us do the quiz first. And then I think through that process where I don't understand the content very well, but I still have to apply whatever knowledge that I've learned through the lecture videos into the quiz, I think that process has helped me learn a bit better. And actually, the most memorable periods of learning for me was actually through failure. I was from JC, so I had no experience in engineering at all. I remember my first time touching a breadboard was actually one of the labs, and that was such a horrible experience for me because I didn't know what was happening at all, and I had a bit of help from the professors, from the lab technicians. That's one lesson that I remember the most fondly in school. So I think failure is definitely a very important aspect of learning.
Isn't failure something that students will naturally experience at some point in their studies? It seems like it would. So why the need for deliberate productive failure?
It is precisely that, right? Because the failure that you encounter most times would likely be high-stakes failure. You don't learn the material well, and your first-year exams or first semester exams, you fail. The logic is that you don't want to experience that kind of failure. That is not the kind of failure that, yes, you can learn from that kind of failure too when it happens, but the logic of productive failure is let's design for failure when it's early, when you're initially learning something new, so as to avoid failure when it really matters. Although, if that happens, yes, there is still an opportunity to learn from it, but that's not what productive failure is about. It's the early part.
I think when you go into something knowing that you might fail at it, it makes the process of learning a bit more fun as well. Because you know that you don't have to take things too seriously, just do your best, just try as many things as you can, and then you'll have fun in the process.
I think my stand is it depends on what sort of failure that is, right? Sometimes you may be talking about just failures based on the fact that you already had been given the material, but you were not unable to make use of it effectively. But that would be quite different from the productive failure that Manu has been discussing. And I don't think we really have so much opportunity to have that sort of failure. Now, one such opportunity that not by design, but in principle, that's how it should be done, is research projects, okay? And then most of you would need to, because your program requires you to do final year project, okay? And probably that is the first time that productive failure is expected and that you are meant to learn from it. But what I often find, okay, when students face that research project, perhaps for the first time experience, maybe you'll find that too, okay, you get blasted with failure. You feel devastated. So first of all, you then associate yourself with, yourself that this is a failure, okay? And then what next? You expect your supervisor to help you out. And if they know about productive failure and want you to struggle, you feel that they are being very mean to you, okay? Whereas those other supervisors who guide you along for the next step and so you are on a smooth path, you feel that they are very good, all right? So there is this bit of a culture. You have been exposed to so many good teachers that when this first comes along, it is difficult to actually turn it around, okay, unless it is given as a consistent requirement of the supervisor to give them productive failure.
How do we normalize being willing to try and fail in our culture, in the Singapore culture, where failure is something that we fear and our self-worth depends on not failing?
I think what we're normalizing is not necessarily failure, but our ability or competence to take on things that are beyond our skill sets and abilities. It's that we fear, and therefore we invite the easy way inside and say, please just tell me. We're not willing to take that journey on ourselves. And so we said, no, I prefer that you tell me. Okay, so what we are normalizing for learning and growth is, can you learn yourself to get into your failure zone, to your zone of proximal development, beyond. I think that's the challenge we need to. So there are research labs, for example, I audit. You go on research visits, and you say PhD students in particular, oh, I've done these projects, and one of the questions I always ask is, how many of your experiments failed? And if the number is too low, I already know that they didn't try interesting things. So it's not the low failure that is the problem, it's a signal that they've not pushed the boundaries much. And if the failure rate is high and the person is saying, I'm still struggling with it, then I know that this person is really pushing the envelope. And I know you said in business it's really cutthroat, but even in business, one of the places where productive failure is really catching on is in the innovation world. If you want to innovate, you want to have a signal so that there is enough failure. That means that you are pushing the products, the innovation, and so on and so forth. And again, this failure is not one that comes about due to laziness, incompetence, stupidity, carelessness. That's not the failure that's to be celebrated. That happens, yes, but that's not. This is the failure that naturally is a side effect or a side product of taking on and pushing the envelope. And that's what we need to normalize, and that's what we need our young, everybody, to be comfortable with.
For me, I step out, I look outside of the curriculum a lot. So for me, I take on a lot of CCAs. So that environment in your CCA or your clubs and things like that, they give you a place, a safe environment of productive failure where you can actually go out and try new things. You don't have like profs or anyone to like teach you how to perform in that CCA or do certain things in that project. So that gives you an environment for you to, like a playground where you try new things and then you find out what works, what don't work. Then you take that as feedback, right? You consult your different peers and things like that. So that through that process, I think that's one way I've really learned. I've also built my character.
Perspective is also quite important. When you go into something new, I think a lot of us, because we're brought up in this culture of always having to succeed, we always want to go into something new and try to be good at it. But if you just go into it wanting to learn or wanting to just discover something new, I think it brings a very different perspective to what you're trying to do. And I think in uni, a lot of times, a lot of things are very quantitative. So we have our grades that define us. We have our GPA, how many CCAs we are in, what position we are in these CCAs. But I think ultimately, at the end of the day, if you look at the grand scheme of things, I think uni is really the best time to fail and to try new things. Because when you go out into the working world, the risks are actually a lot higher. And in uni, if you're scared of failure, then when you go out, it's even worse. So I think in uni is what Dom says, is really a playground. Go and play with new toys. Don't be afraid to figure out new things about yourself, about the people around you as well.
Co-curricular activities are really one of the safe places that you can have a productive failure. I talked about myself being the senior faculty in residence of Pioneer Hall. And for those who are familiar with the residential hall culture in NTU, you may know that it is one of the 2 halls that were earmarked for residential education. And we wanted to leverage on the fact that things that you do in the halls are fun, all right? But we also want to encourage the understanding that just because you are doing something for fun doesn't mean you cannot learn, and doesn't mean that you don't have to put in the effort. All right, so we had some creative projects. And one of the very important factors in this kind of scheme is that minimal intervention from the faculty advisor. Okay, so you let them fail, but they need to keep a progress journal. So for half of the project time, they are left on their own devices to be freely making mistakes and picking up. And then that's when we have one single intervention point by the faculty who will read their journal and then look at how their mind had worked around the processes and so on, and they give one round of advice, and then they continue to the end of the project. The grading criteria, that makes it very important, that they have to talk about the failure, okay, and how they had actually picked themselves up. So it was made very clear that we expect them to fail. And then we also expect them to try to be productive through their failure. This is one way that I had tried to bring productivity into a kind of safe space and still give them something tangible.
How do we get students to avoid giving up failure at the initial stage? And would you say that intrinsic motivation is part of it? And if so, do you have any advice on how we can actually motivate ourselves into the zone?
Do know that when you were a kid, before school started, you already had that in you. Like productive failure was the way you learned just about everything, from walking to making sense of things to learning a language. As a kid, they fall down, they just get up and try again. And they can keep trying and trying and trying. And these are not special kids I'm talking about. It was all of us here. Point here is you already have it in you. Unfortunately, the school beats it out of you. Which is, that's a bad thing, right? But on the plus side, it's also a learned thing, right? We've learned, our behavior has been conditioned over time that we've learned those things that we don't want to do something like that. Comes with that is this another associated thing about learned helplessness. The mode of instruction and delivery in the schools basically condition you to just wait for help to arrive, right? Because if you wait long enough, it will come, okay? Because that's how the teachers are in the end, oh, you've got to pass exam, so it will come. And that connects to Dominic's point about you're not alone when you take on challenging things. part of what failure, when you take on challenging things, is you also need to learn how to be resourceful. So if you're in that zone and you have that mindset, that's great. But then if you're waiting for help to arrive, it's going to get overwhelming. So you've got to do multiple things at the same time. And that's what I guess you did. So don't be afraid to get into that zone. Know that it's in you. And learn to be resourceful so that you can reprogram yourself back to. And which is why philosophically, and many scientists would say, if you listen to Nobel Prize winners, they say, I'm still like a child. I still play with ideas like a child. And there is some scientific truth in that. It's whether you want to find that person, and you can reprogram yourself to find that person in you.
I know it's such a steep sort of uphill effort to do that for really academic courses. That's why I chose the easier way of starting with something that they find is fine. When you're doing something that is for fun, it comes naturally. It's like just having the toy, right? It's a toy to you, and therefore you won't think that, oh, how come my prof is not helping me to solve the problem? And that's why it was viable for the DEEP program, okay, which always starts with the co-curricular activities that are fun, and the students are intrinsically motivated and excited about.
How do we make sense of trying to, like, performance versus learning? Getting that A versus I'm going to fail a little bit, but maybe I don't get the A. How do you think through this? Or maybe from your perspective, Manu, productive failure should lead to an A. Like, what's...
Not my opinion. That's what the science. I've got evidence to back me up. This is not a matter of opinion. You're entitled to your own opinion, but I can counter that with evidence, right? That I must be allowed. And the evidence is very, very clear, very robust, that if you design it well, you design it early in your initial learning process, you will understand it deeply, so that the likelihood of failure when it matters is, as a matter of evidence, reduced.
I hope that what you have taken back from what Manu has shared about productive failure would change certain perspective to you, on whatever failure that came your way.